Hello, you're watching the development vlog for Shokin, a multi-platform waitlist management tool soon to be available on Android and iOS. This week is week 51 of development. The current status is that the Android alpha version is ready for testing on Google Play Store, and the iOS alpha version has just been approved by the iOS Store and has become available on iOS Store for testing. This was great news for me. The task for last week was quite literally figuring out the policies and procedures for uploading the app to iOS TestFlight and have it approved and be available for distribution to testers. And that was complete. One of the concerns that I ran into was some of the testimonials on the internet about requirements of implementing Apple login on your app to be approved by TestFlight. Fortunately, that wasn't a requirement. The person or robot, whoever reviewed my app, approved it. And I have since uploaded 2 or 3 new builds, and each and every single one of those builds have been approved without Apple login. And that's great news, because implementing that requires platform-specific knowledge that would take a little bit of time for me to get used to. As a reminder, the infrastructure that I'm using in the app is Kotlin multi-platform, KMP, and I'm trying to keep as much stuff in a common code as possible so that I don't have to deal with platform-specific implementations such as Apple login or Google login. That said, though, one of the things that I ran into this week with one of the testers that I have did make me reconsider my avoidance of those logins. The current login system that I have is OTP, one-time passcode. In other words, the user would input his or her phone or their phone number, not phone number, email address, and then they would receive a code, and then they put that code into the app to log in. Problem is, the source domain name for where those codes are generated is a new domain that I registered for my particular service. And it hasn't had enough time to accumulate, I suppose, good reputation for domain names. And this is one of the things that I didn't know before. Apparently, in order to reduce, or perhaps not necessarily reducing, but better detect spam emails on the internet, domain names have reputations in terms of how likely they're to send spam. And that's one of the tools that Gmail and other service providers would use to decide whether or not the email coming into their server is likely a spam email so that it would be relegated to the spam box, or a regular email. For any new domain, like the one that I just registered, the one that I'm using to send OTP codes to my users, if there's no reputation, it's actually bad reputation. It's sort of like your credit score, right? When you first start making money and start using credit, you don't really have a credit history. As a result, your credit score is pretty bad, and banks are not very much willing to approve your credit applications. I'm in that stage now. I don't have a good credit history, and well, with the domain. So the user just could not see my OTP email sent to them. The problem, of course, is that in my app, I specifically asked the person to make sure you check your spam folder, and that's safe practice. The problem is that warnings line, that notice, is probably too ubiquitous for people to really pay attention to. I myself, a lot of times, would forget to read those things because they're just too common. And lo and behold, this person did not check a spam box, despite my explicit instructions on the login page for him to do that. And I'm not going to say that this is user error, right? Because part of the design that we do is to make sure that users cannot make mistakes. And this is one of the things that, the testing revealed to me that I need to address. So how do you address this? Reputation would take time to build. And for my particular app, I would imagine that some volume of emails would have to build up before their reputation can be improved. One of the ways that people can do is by marking my thing as not spam. And the more people who do that, the more likely the reputation would improve. And over time, OTP emails hopefully would land in your inbox as opposed to your spam folder. So with that option out of mind now, because it's really not practical, the other way is to use a new login system, either using a cell phone login system or using a federated login, such as Apple login or Google login. I think that would even further reduce the login and sign up friction. The headache that I have is I really don't want to have to write platform-specific code. And when it comes to login using Google Play services or using Apple services, you have to do platform-specific code, which means 2 different copies of things to maintain and to keep up. And I think at this point, I don't really have a choice. The other option that I have is, of course, linking it to a mobile phone and sending SMS notifications and OTP codes for people to log in. I'm trying to avoid that route myself. Cell phone logins, from what I have learned and also from what I can conceive or perceive, likely would increase a lot of support load down the line. What if you changed your number? What if your SMS gets hijacked? Or it's not as comfortable as email addresses. So in other words, at some point, I'm going to make a ticket for myself. At some point, I'm going to implement Apple login and Google login, platform-specific login, such that people don't have to deal with OTP being sent to their spam box. So that's the user side of things that I've contemplated this week. The other improvement that I have been making, I'm still making right now, in fact, as I'm recording this video, is my CI/CD pipeline. So now with everything set in place, in other words, all my builds and my uploads to Google Play Store as well as Apple iOS App Store have been successful, I want to polish the automation of it. Now, to be clear, up until this point, I have been using GitHub Actions to build and upload my deployments. Now I just want to consolidate them into nice. I have a lot of duplications when it comes to upload scripts or generating release notes. I want to consolidate them. In addition to that, one of the things that I also looked at was automating the submission for review and release for iOS. So on Android, on Google Play Store, when you submit your app to, let's say, an alpha testing track, the app is automatically queued for review and submission. And from my experience, Google Play Store doesn't really do a lot of manual reviews. The reviews that I have been receiving, they have been very quick, and as far as I can see, they're almost certainly going to be automated reviews. With iOS, on the other hand, I've received correspondence from iOS review team with regards to why some of my builds have failed, and they would attach a screenshot and then they would blur out the emails that they've used. You can clearly see that this is not a robot or an AI that's doing it. So they require that you manually certify each upload such that it can be sent to the review queue. And at this point, I'm doing that manually. So my CI/CD pipeline would upload the file to the App Store Connect, and I have to log into the App Store Connect and click a bunch of buttons for it to be pushed into the review queue. And, that's another thing to be automated in the CI/CD pipeline. So next week, the goal should be fairly straightforward. I have mostly, I'm going to say that I have accomplished the goal that I set for the end of the year, although we only have about 1.5 weeks left, 2 weeks left. So the task for next week is clean up my CI/CD pipeline, consolidate things into smaller bundles of scripts, and improve and reduce friction on the existing scripts. The example that I just gave, automating the submission for approval for iOS and stuff like that. And the other thing that I also have to clean up is my versioning. I did not know that iOS versioning requires that it's only numbers and then dots. So you are allowed 3 numbers with 2 dots split in between. It can be 1.1.1 and nothing else. Whereas Android doesn't really care. You can put in whatever version number that you can, alphanumeric stuff. So because I developed Android first, I have been using alphanumeric versions. And I want to consolidate them together such that they would have the same versioning system. And also reduce the confusion that I might have with the version numbers. The other consideration that I'm also giving is the build numbers. How do I manage the build numbers across 2 different platforms? Do I have a global one, reduce some headache, but then introduce some confusion down the line? Stuff like that. I need to think about those and come up with a strategy and then actually implement it. And as far as I think, as far as I'm concerned, I believe I would want to keep one single build number, the internal build number, and just strictly increasing number counting from 0. So far, I think I'm on 168. I'm looking at right now. And given the uniqueness requirement for iOS Store and the strictly increasing requirement for Android Play Store, I think a strictly increasing build number for every build with any diffs in the commits would probably be the best way to go. And for Android, it's not too bad. I have, 2 billion builds that I can make before I run out of build numbers. So I'm not too concerned about that. That said, I have to come up with a decision and implement it and streamline it to make it look nice. The last thing is, of course, the release notes. Currently, the release notes are essentially summaries provided by AI on my Git comments, Git messages. And there's some tuning that needs to be done there. The AI seems to enjoy very verbose and flowery language when it comes to summarizing my release notes and not really surface important updates for users. That requires some tuning in the language when I send it to LLM. And I think I set it up to use OTP, GPT 5.0. That was a couple months back. Anyway, so a lot of optimization improvements that I want to do in my CI/CD pipeline for next week. And I think that's about it. So that's it for this week. I'll see you next week.